Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to be discussing the benefits of having an auxiliary tank for a contractor working out of a shop, a home shop type of thing, or even maybe even a home gamer that got some projects going on that he uses pneumatic tools for. I'll give you a little bit of background. I'm a contractor. I mainly do finish work, using finish nailers, things like that. For everything as far as that kind of stuff goes, I just use a little tiny compressor, Senko 1 gallon finish compressor, and that's great because I can take it inside. It's fairly quiet. It'll run everything up to my 15 gauge finish nailer. But once in a while I got to bust out a larger compressor that's able to handle framing nailers, coil nailers if I'm doing hardy siding, that kind of thing. The downside of that is it's a little bit heavier, but the big thing is it's super loud, and having that thing right next to you all day long while you're driving nails, and it just kicks on suddenly, and it can make you jump out of your skin with how loud it is. Having that right next to you does not make for a fun work day, but you get used to it. I took on a couple flooring jobs, and I have a cleat nailer, and that's when I decided I'm not bringing this thing in the house. I'm just not bringing this thing in the house. But I needed to. I was working with teak, and I needed to be able to adjust the pressure. So I didn't want to put the compressor outside and have to adjust the regulator on the compressor and be walking in and out adjusting the pressure. I definitely didn't want to have the thing inside with me because it would just be way too loud. I decided to get an auxiliary tank. The best decision I ever made when it comes to that stupid compressor, or any loud compressor for that matter, which if it's oilless and it's any decent capacity, it's loud. I got this thing, and I thought about how I was gonna set it up, and I decided to put a regulator on it. Man, it was a game changer. It really was. Number one, you can have the compressor as far away from you as you want to. You just got to have the hose for it. But everyone's got those. It's also, there's another benefit. It's a great use for that stiff hose that you hate dragging around and you stopped using long ago, and it's just sitting there collecting dust. Now you can use it. You use it on between the compressor and the auxiliary tank. The big benefit is that you get more CFM, your compressor cycles less, and you can keep this auxiliary tank really close to you, but not listen to the compressor. You can adjust the pressure all you need without having to walk a million miles or listen to the compressor all day long. But the CFM benefits are great as well. If you start running more than one gun, you start doing, maybe using like mechanics tools that require higher CFM. I'm not too sure what this particular setup would be able to handle as far as that goes, but I know it can definitely handle more than one gun. Two people using like a framing nailer or coil nailer, it can definitely hold up to that. I've set this up for two guys on my roof doing roofing, and it held up just fine. Whereas before, I've had a roofer basically keeping my pancake compressor running almost non-stop. So those are the benefits. Now I'm going to talk about how, as far as expense and what parts you need. So this is the Harbor Freight one that I picked up, and I don't remember if it came with these parts on it or not, but the core of it's still the same. You got the tank, and you've got that three-way fitting coming out of the tank with a gauge on it, and the rest of it you're not going to use. Basically, you want to take off the little nipple and the hose on the other side. You want to take those out, and you'd be left with a 1/4 inch MPT female opening on either side. And with that, you want to get some fittings. And the fittings that you're gonna want, well, you'll need the couplers for the air hoses. So you need a male coupler and a female coupler. You'll want a valve for the male end, so you can completely isolate the pressure and disconnect the compressor if you need to or want to, or when you're draining it. You'll definitely want this valve. You don't want to leave just open air blowing out of the end of a hose nozzle. So put this valve on. You'll want a regulator, which Harbor Freight has one for $7. I didn't use this particular one, but I didn't pay much more than that. The one that I have, though, it unfortunately costs about $20 nowadays. So this one, looking at the specs and looking at the setup, looks like it's pretty much the same thing. And you'll just need some brass male-to-male couplers for the 1/4-inch MPT. You set it up just like this. I've made a diagram. Everything kind of shown here, you can see in the dark red. You got your hose coming from your compressor, and it plugs into the male end of the hose connector that's going into that valve, which goes into one side of the T that's on the compressor. That's on the auxiliary tank. And on the other end of the auxiliary tank, you've got, 1/4-inch coupler with your regulator, another 1/4-inch coupler, and your female for the hose. But you can kind of see how this sits in line between the tool and the compressor. These are all the parts you need other than some pipe dope. You want to get some decent pipe dope. You can use Teflon tape, but you want to be careful that none of that gets in. That will screw up a pneumatic air system if you're not careful with it. I suggest just using pipe dope to be safe, and it's cheap. But here are all the parts you need. Even if you pay full price at Harbor Freight, which if you shop Harbor Freight, if you're a Harbor Freight frequenter, you know that they've got coupons left and right. And this tank does go on sale. I've seen it on sale many times for around $40. I think I paid $35 for mine. But you can get 20% off coupons, all that stuff. But that's $60. You're looking at for the fittings, you're looking at about $15, and then $8 for the regulator. You'd be able to put this thing together for $80-$90. You probably already have the hoses, assuming you have the compressor. If you don't have the compressor, that compressor that's in the diagram over at Lowe's is $100. It's got a decent warranty, 150 PSI. So the way you run this, you set the compressor regulator with this particular tank, you set it for 125 because that's the tank's rated maximum. You could probably get away with more, but why chance it? You set the regulator coming out of the compressor for 125 PSI. Plug it into the hose as shown on the diagram. You set the auxiliary tank regulator to whatever you want the tool to run at. And you can fine tune it there. And then, of course, your hose to the tool coming out of the regulator side. The compressor will fill that tank. Initial startup will take much longer than it normally does. But once that tank is full, it will run a lot less throughout the day, especially if you're using your tool heavily. But even if you're not, you can put that compressor as far away as you want and still be able to fine-tune your tool with the inline regulator. Your compressor is just going to run a lot less. And if you have a coworker that needs to slap another tool into the actually either into the compressor or into the auxiliary tank, if you put a T on it, you can run two tools easily with this setup. So there it is for $80, $90, it's kind of a no-brainer. If you look up, this essentially gets you a 17-gallon compressor. If you look up 20-gallon compressors on anywhere, even Harbor Freight's is $250, and it's going to be a lot bigger. With this setup, you can always use just the compressor or just the auxiliary tank. A lot of people keep their auxiliary tanks pressurized. You don't really have to worry about as much going wrong with keeping a little bit of pressure in the auxiliary tank, as long as you keep it separate from your compressor when you store it. I don't suggest doing that for lengths of time, but if you're working at the same place day in and day out, what I do is I just drain my compressor like you normally do, have that valve shut off on the auxiliary tank, and just leave it pressurized. And that way, the next day when you start up, you just plug it in, open that valve, and your compressor has a much easier time getting back up to pressure. There's a lot of benefits to this versus buying a bigger compressor, in my opinion, and especially for a shop. You can put that compressor, you can hide it, you can insulate it, you can put it, in another room, or put it outside for that matter. You can build a doghouse for it, put it outside, let your neighbors deal with it, and just keep this auxiliary tank inside with the regulator where you can tune the pressure. So I hope everyone takes this into consideration if you're running into similar situations or whatever with the compressor. And I hope this helps some people out. Thanks.